For 30 years, Johnny Carson wasn't just the king of late-night television. He was the gatekeeper of Hollywood itself. Each evening, millions tuned in as their favorite stars smiled under his warm lights. But behind the charm, Johnny saw what the audience never could: a world built on secrets. He wasn't just interviewing celebrities, he was guarding their truths. Because when the cameras stopped rolling and the laughter faded, Johnny knew that many of the people sitting on that famous couch were living double lives. And in a time when one whisper could destroy a career, those secrets were more dangerous than anyone could imagine. In his final years, Carson began to open up about what he'd witnessed. 9 stories that revealed the hidden side of Hollywood's brightest stars. Stories he never told the public, but couldn't quite take to his grave.
Rock Hudson, the heartthrob with the hidden life. To the world, Rock Hudson was everything a woman could want: tall, handsome, confident. He defined masculinity in the 1950s. Every smile on screen felt effortless, every love story believable. But Johnny knew it was all an act. When Hudson came on The Tonight Show, he'd talk about women, dates, and romance. But Carson could see the tension behind that grin, a man terrified that one wrong word could expose everything. Hudson's secret wasn't just personal, it was the foundation of a lie built by Hollywood itself. His studio arranged a marriage for him, not for love, but for protection. Because in those days, being gay didn't just end your career, it made you a public enemy. Johnny never betrayed him. He'd sit there, smiling, moving the conversation along. But later, he told friends that every interview with Rock felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of lies. When Rock passed away in 1985 from AIDS-related complications, it wasn't just a tragedy, it was the moment that forced Hollywood to confront a truth it had buried for decades. And Carson? He never forgot that smile, or the fear behind it. But Rock wasn't the only one living that way. There was another, a man who built his entire life around sophistication and charm, while quietly hiding who he really was. Cary Grant, the gentleman who never truly settled down. Cary Grant was the very definition of the Hollywood gentleman, perfectly dressed, endlessly witty, and effortlessly cool. Audiences saw him as the ultimate ladies' man, but Johnny knew there was more behind that polished image. Grant had shared a home for years with actor Randolph Scott, a situation that insiders referred to as Bachelor Hall. Photos from the time showed them working out together, lounging in robes, laughing over breakfast. To anyone looking closely, it was obvious, but the studios spun it as 2 bachelors sharing expenses. When Johnny spoke to Grant on his show, he couldn't ignore how carefully every word was chosen. The marriages Grant later entered into felt like carefully constructed shields, part of a lifelong performance. Carson wasn't judgmental, but he couldn't help feeling uneasy knowing how much pain these illusions caused. He once confided to a producer that Grant was the best actor Hollywood ever made, because even off-camera, he never stopped performing. And as the years went on, Johnny realized that for many of these stars, the lies weren't just personal, they were survival. But for one woman, the deception became Hollywood's greatest love story. Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, the perfect illusion. For decades, fans believed Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy shared a timeless romance, a love that defied Hollywood's cynicism. But Johnny had heard the truth. Their 26-year relationship, he told friends, was one of Hollywood's most successful performances, not because it was fake, but because it worked for both of them. Tracy, a devout Catholic, could never divorce his wife. And Hepburn, she was one of the most powerful women in Hollywood, but her independence drew constant questions about why she never married. Their relationship gave both of them cover, a shield from the kind of gossip that could end careers. Behind the scenes, Hepburn shared her life mostly with women, but the world wasn't ready to see her that way. So the great love story became a carefully maintained legend. Johnny admired her. He told a close friend that Hepburn was one of the few who managed to live partly on her own terms, even in a world built on lies. She wore men's trousers before it was fashionable. She spoke her mind when others stayed quiet. And in that way, Carson saw her as braver than most of the men who sat on his stage. But then came someone even bolder, a man whose on-screen honesty hid an even deeper secret off-screen.
Marlon Brando, the rebel who hid in plain sight. No one embodied truth on camera like Marlon Brando. He broke every rule of acting, every convention of Hollywood. His performances felt raw, real, too real. But Carson knew the paradox. The man who preached authenticity lived a life of calculated concealment. Brando was rumored to have relationships with both men and women, something almost unthinkable at the height of his fame. Yet his studios carefully curated his image as the ultimate heterosexual rebel. When Carson once said, "I admire Brando, but I pitied him, because he taught America to be honest, but he couldn't be honest himself." And then there was the young star who became an icon before he even had time to face the truth.
James Dean, the legend frozen in time. James Dean lived fast, died young, and became immortal. To millions, he was rebellion itself, raw emotion wrapped in leather and smoke. But Johnny, who came to fame just after Dean's death, heard the whispers from everyone who knew him. Dean's career was short, but his ambition was endless. And Hollywood in the 1950s was ruthless. Rumors swirled that Dean formed relationships with powerful men who could open doors for him, directors, producers, mentors who promised opportunity in exchange for silence. Carson never judged him. He saw Dean as a victim of the same system that trapped so many others. He was too real for a world built on make-believe, Johnny once said. Dean's death froze that image in time, forever young, forever misunderstood. And in a cruel twist, it preserved his myth while burying his truth. Hollywood turned him into a symbol of freedom, even though in life he'd never truly had it. But not every star had their secrets protected by tragedy. Some built entire lives around lies too detailed to tell apart from fiction. Raymond Burr was television royalty. Perry Mason, Ironside, he was the embodiment of justice, strength, and virtue. But off-screen, his life was a carefully constructed illusion. Burr told interviewers he'd been married 3 times. He said his wife and child had died tragically in a plane crash. He even claimed to have been wounded in the war. Every word of it was false. Johnny knew it, and every time Burr came on the show, he'd play along, interviewing a man he knew was performing his own life story. In truth, Burr had lived for decades with his partner, Robert Benavidez. They grew orchids together, built a quiet life out of view. But in the 1950s, a gay television star could not exist. So Burr invented one who could. Carson later called it the saddest kind of acting, not pretending for the screen, but pretending to the world. And yet, Burr's secret wasn't unique. Another star, decades earlier, had found a way to make her truth look like art. Marlene Dietrich, the woman who made secrets stylish. If anyone could turn a scandal into mystique, it was Marlene Dietrich. She was bold, magnetic, and entirely her own creation. Carson adored interviewing her. She spoke in riddles, poetic, playful, always half revealing and half hiding. She'd wear a tuxedo one night, a silk gown the next. And when journalists whispered about her affairs with both men and women, she didn't deny them, she smiled and said nothing. Johnny saw in her what he called the genius of disguise. She didn't run from her truth, she dressed it up, performed it, and turned it into a symbol of freedom. While American stars had to pretend, Dietrich used her European background as a shield. She could get away with what others couldn't. In a world built on repression, she made her androgyny glamorous, her silence powerful. Carson found her mesmerizing because she wasn't hiding behind lies. She was hiding in plain sight. But not every couple had that luxury. Some built an entire marriage just to keep the spotlight away.
Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester, the double disguise. Charles Laughton was one of the greatest actors of his time, brilliant, eccentric, unforgettable. His wife, Elsa Lanchester, became iconic as the Bride of Frankenstein. Together, they seemed like Hollywood's perfect creative couple. But Johnny knew the truth behind their long union. They were partners, yes, but not in the way the world believed. Both Laughton and Lanchester were gay. Their marriage was a partnership of survival. It protected their reputations while giving each of them the freedom to live quietly on their own terms. Johnny admired their loyalty to each other. He once said they beat the system by joining it. Unlike many studio-arranged marriages, theirs endured for decades. They worked together, laughed together, and built lives rooted in understanding, even if the rest of the world never knew what that understanding really was. To Carson, their story wasn't about deceit. It was about dignity. Two people trying to hold on to their careers and their peace in a world that gave them neither. But one name haunted Johnny more than any other. A man whose face defined beauty and whose perfection became his prison.
Tyrone Power, the idol who couldn't be himself. Tyrone Power was Hollywood's matinee idol, the man every woman adored and every man envied. He played swashbucklers, lovers, heroes. His image was flawless, and that was the problem. Carson heard countless stories from old-school guests who had known Power well. They spoke of his charm, his kindness, and the constant fear that surrounded him. Power lived two lives, the adored public star and the private man who could never let anyone see who he really was. His marriages, to Annabella, to Linda Christian, gave him the respectability the studios demanded. But behind closed doors, he confided to friends about the exhaustion of pretending. Johnny once said Power's face was both his fortune and his curse. It opened every door, but locked him inside an image he couldn't escape. When Power died suddenly at just 44, the world mourned the loss of a star. But Carson, years later, mourned the man who'd never been allowed to live as himself. And that, more than anything, stayed with him. So, to conclude, let's look at Johnny's final reflection. As Johnny grew older, the laughter that once filled his studio began to echo differently. He'd spent his life asking questions, making people comfortable enough to talk. But the most important truths, the ones that defined an entire generation of stars, could never be said aloud. In private, he confessed to friends that he sometimes felt guilty. He'd smiled through interviews, knowing the stories being told were fiction. He'd nodded along while his guests described lives that didn't exist. He wasn't angry at them. He was angry at the world that forced them to hide. Hollywood, he once said, was built on dreams. But some of those dreams came at the cost of someone's truth.